역사는 거대한 사건과 숫자로 기록됩니다. 그러나 우리가 기억해야 할 역사는 언제나 한 사람의 얼굴에서 시작됩니다. 이름 하나, 돌아오지 못한 고향, 말하지 못했던 시간, 그리고 그 침묵을 이어받은 가족. 그 몇 줄의 기록 뒤에는 꿈을 잃어버린 한 소녀가 있었습니다. 그녀의 이름은 곽예남, 일본군 위안부 피해자입니다. 전쟁은 끝났지만 그녀의 전쟁은 끝나지 않았습니다. 해방이 찾아왔어도 그녀는 곧바로 고향으로 돌아올 수 없었습니다. 말하는 순간 다시 살아나는 고통. 피해자가 오히려 세상의 시선을 두려워해야 했던 시간. 곽예남은 자신의 상처보다 더 긴 침묵 속에서 살아야 했습니다. 침묵한 것은 피해자만이 아니었습니다. 그 곁을 지킨 딸 또한 어머니의 아픔을 대신할 수 없는 고통을 함께 견뎌야 했습니다. 어머니의 침묵은 잊어서 생긴 것이 아니었습니다. 너무나 선명히 기억하고 있었기에 차마 꺼내지 못한 침묵이었습니다. 1944년 봄, 19살의 곽예남은 자신의 의지와 상관없이 전쟁의 소용돌이에 휘말렸습니다. 인간의 존엄도 자신의 운명을 선택할 권리도 빼앗겼습니다. 전쟁이 끝난 뒤에도 그녀는 고향으로 돌아오지 못했습니다. 낯선 중국 땅에서 보낸 60여 년, 계절은 수없이 바뀌었지만 마음속 고향은 조금도 가까워지지 않았습니다. 이 영화는 곽예남이 걸어온 삶과 그녀가 남긴 증언, 그리고 그 기억을 이어가는 사람들의 이야기를 따라갑니다.
정말 기가 막혀요. 그 어마어마한 군인들이 달라들고 강제로 달라들지긴 정말 기가 막혀. 하도 입살을 깨물고 도망을 가려고 뿌리치고 도망을 나오다가 붙잡혀서 끌어가면 당하면서도 어떻게 기가 막히고 가슴 아프고.
Amid the dark shadow of war in the 20th century, a chapter of history was deliberately buried. More than 400,000 women from 11 countries and regions, including China, South Korea, North Korea, the Philippines, and the Netherlands, were conscripted by the Imperial Japanese Army and reduced to comfort women, one of the largest cases of systematic sexual violence in human history. It was not until 1991 that the outcry of survivor Kim Ha-sun reopened the old wounds, prompting the world to re-examine the crimes against humanity committed by Japan during the Second World War.
On the Japanese right, they labeled all comfort women as prostitutes who voluntarily entered the brothels, thus relieving the Japanese military of responsibility. The feminist distinction between prostitutes and sex slaves, between sex workers and sex slaves, appeared in malign form.
The atrocities against comfort women are merely the tip of the iceberg of Japan's wartime aggression. Under the false slogan of the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere, the Japanese military perpetrated a series of massacres in various Asian countries. In the 1937 Nanjing Massacre, over 300,000 civilians were killed. In the 1945 Manila Massacre, about 100,000 civilians lost their lives as a result of Japanese military, artillery bombardment, and systematic massacres. In Southeast Asia, the Japanese military conscripted millions of civilian laborers and prisoners of war to construct the so-called death railway, and over perishing in the process.
And if you passed out and you fell on the ground, you weren't allowed to pick your... A friend of mine, her mother was in camp, and she took heart and wound. So she and I were sort of halfway carrying her mother. And the Japanese came with their, bayonets, and they said, drop. So she had to drop her mother. He dropped her. And then he says, go. And she never saw her mother.
These crimes were not isolated incidents, but the inevitable outcome of Japan's militarist expansionist policy, using terror to crush the will, to resisting occupied territories, plunder resources, and establish colonial rule.
The International Military Tribunal for the Far East will now pronounce the sentences on the accused convicted on this indictment.
After the Second World War, the international community carried out a reckoning of Japanese war criminals through the Tokyo trials, but justice was not fully realized. Many war criminals evaded punishment and even returned to political. For decades, the Japanese government has sought to whitewash its history of aggressive, revising textbooks, denying the coercive nature of the comfort women, and refusing to provide state compensation to victims.
日韓間で慰安婦問題が政治外交問題化した1990年代、初頭以降、慰安婦問題に関する本格的な事実調査を行いました。しかしながら日本政府が発見した資料の中には軍や官憲によるいわゆる強制連行というものを確認はできるものはありませんでした。
性奴隷というような言葉は、事実に反するものであり、使用すべきではないというのが日本の考え方です。
Former United Nations Human Rights Commission commissioner stated, the Japanese government's historical stance constitutes a secondary harm to human rights. The survivors are now elderly and many passed away with regret while waiting for apologies. Japan's actions not only violate international law but also undermine the historical memory and reconciliation foundation in the Asian region. What is even more concerning is that the rise of right-wing forces in Japan is pushing the country towards militarization, which poses a serious threat to the post-war international order. In 2015, Japan and South Korea reached a so-called agreement on the comfort woman issue, which contained no formal apology nor recognition of state responsibility. The deal was eventually nullified due to fierce opposition from the victims. On March 11th, 16 experts from the United Nations Human Rights Council's special mechanisms issued a joint press release expressing serious concern over Japan depriving comfort women victims of the right to seek truth, justice, and compensation, and called on Japan to formally apologize, provide full compensation, and protect the relevant historical records in textbooks. In 1931, citing the false claim that Manchuria and Mongolia are Japan's lifeline, Japan brazenly launched the Mukden incident against China. In 1941, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, claiming it acted for the purpose of self-defense. In 2015, the Shinzo Abe administration fabricated the new security bill and introduced the concept of a situation threatening Japan's survival. Since then, Japan has gradually lifted the ban on the right of collective self-defense, which had been constrained since the Second World War. The Japanese government can now use military force against other countries without being directly attacked, so long as it deems an international event a threat to its survival. In recent years, Japan has accelerated its militarization, reinterpreting its peace constitution, lifting the ban on collective self-defense, drastically increasing its defense budget, and strengthening its military alliance with the United States. In 2025, Japan even began to explore amending the 3 non-nuclear principles and discussing the possibility of possessing nuclear weapons. The moves not only broke Japan's pacifist post-war commitment, but also raised fears of an arms race in Asia.
文民である政治家が判断を間違えて戦争に突き進むこともあります。だから若い人たちには勉強してもらいたいのだ。私が国連一般討論演説でも述べたことでありますが、歴史に正面から向き合うことなくして明るい未来が開けることはございません。私は強くそのように思っております。これを改めて強調させていただいて、
The truth of history cannot be buried, nor can the call for justice be silenced. The struggle of comfort women survivors is not only for their personal dignity, but also to safeguard historical memory and remind people of the cruelty of war. The Japanese government must face history squarely, apologize to, and compensate the victims. This is the prerequisite for rebuilding regional trust. Otherwise, Japan's militaristic expansion and historical revisionism will pose the greatest challenge to the post-war international order. We must not let the tragedy of history repeat itself, because peace and justice are the eternal pursuit of humanity.
日本政府没有跟我们说孩子，背地道歉的方式，各个国家说孩子联合起来，希望日本政府正视历史为我们这个受害者讨还公道。
지금 이제 2세대 분들인데 그분들 제가 보면서 느낀 게 뭐냐면 사실 그분들 지금 대변인 역할을 하고 그분들하고 회의도 하고 그분들을 만나서 느낀 게 뭐냐면 이게 정치적으로 이용을 너무 많이 당하시고 돈 받아주겠다고 하고 돈 받아가서 사기치는 사람도 많으시고 또 그분들이 유복자들이 많으세요. 이게 한 사람 개인적인 얘기를 들어보면 가슴이 무너지는 게 그냥 결혼하자마자 그냥 전쟁통에 끌려가서 그 아드님 혼자 태어나가지고 혼자 사시는 그런 분들이 너무 많더라고요. 그러니까 내가 그 자식 중에 세 번째 자식인데 부모들은 아버지 얼굴을 봤어요. 근데 이 전쟁이 나서 나는 그 피해 당사자로서 유복자가 됐다는 거죠. 그래서 아버지 얼굴도 모르고 이 전쟁 속에 제가 살아남아서 거기에 대한 애잔한 마음이 있어요. 그래서 나는 솔직히 그분들 너무 불쌍한 게 그 아버지 뼈가루를 찾아오고 싶다는 그 마음이 저도 나이를 먹어보니까 자기의 뿌리를 찾고 싶어 하잖아요. 근데 그 아버지를 못 봤다는 그 사무치는 그 그리움이 아버지 그 뼈가루 유골이라도 찾았으면 좋겠다. 그게 가슴에 점여요. 그래서 국가가 거기서 희생돼서 한국에 돌아오지 못하는 그분들 있으시잖아요. 그 유해들을 찾는 걸 좀 멈추지 않고 그분들이 계셔서 우리가 있는 거잖아요. 그분들이 찾게 도와주고 그분들의 한을 풀어줘야 된다고 생각해요. 저는 그게 제일 가슴이 아파요.